When the doctor said I had a second daughter, my husband lost his temper. A second daughter? Are you serious? He shouted. He barged into the labor room and attacked me. The staff quickly stopped him and threw him out. I was shaken but determined. Within a week, I gave him a surprise he never expected. My name is Charlotte Harris, and for a while, I thought my life was a dream come true. I grew up in a small town but moved to Chicago when I was 22 to chase my career in marketing. I worked hard, made my way up the ladder, and by the time I was 32, I had a solid position at a well-known firm. Life seemed perfect when I met Ethan Harris. Ethan was the kind of man who could make you feel like you were the only person in the room. Charming, confident, and intelligent, he swept me off my feet almost instantly. He was a successful real estate agent, and his ambition mirrored my own. We quickly fell in love and got married not long after. At the time, it felt like the start of something beautiful. Our partnership was seamless. Ethan would joke about how we'd be the power couple of Chicago, and I believed every word. Our love story seemed to get better when I found out I was pregnant. I'll never forget the look on Ethan's face when I told him. He lit up, spinning me around the room and talking about all the wonderful things we do as parents. It was a magical moment, and I clung to that hope as my pregnancy progressed. 9 months later, our daughter, Lily, was born. She was perfect, and Ethan doted on her. He was attentive, loving, and always by my side. I thought to myself, this is it. This is the life I've always wanted. A year later, I discovered I was pregnant again, and the joy I felt was overwhelming. I imagined Lily having a sister to grow up with, and I thought of our home filled with laughter and love. But something changed during that second pregnancy. Ethan started working late, constantly. At first, I assumed he was just trying to secure a better future for our growing family, but his behavior became colder, more detached. He stopped asking how I was feeling or showing interest in baby preparations. I told myself he was stressed and tried to be patient. Still, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. The turning point came during Emma's birth. I'll never forget the doctor announcing, "It's a girl," and expecting Ethan to smile, to celebrate with me. Instead, his face fell. His words were like a knife to my heart. "Are you sure there's no mistake?" I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but the bitterness in his tone said otherwise. That night, as I held baby Emma in my arms, I cried. Not because I wasn't happy, but because I realized Ethan wasn't the man I thought he was. Things only got worse from there. Ethan grew colder and more irritable. He would snap at the smallest things, often leaving me in tears. He didn't care about the late-night feedings or helping with Lily and Emma. I started feeling like a single parent, even though he was right there in the same house. I still held on to hope that we could fix things, but that hope was shattered one evening after a minor argument over something so trivial I can't even remember what it was. He slapped me hard. My ears rang, and for a moment, I was too stunned to react. Ethan looked as shocked as I felt, but instead of apologizing, he stormed out of the room, leaving me trembling and terrified. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a bad phase. This was something darker, something dangerous. I confided in my best friend, Natalie Brooks. Natalie and I had been close since college, and she was the one person I knew I could trust. I told her everything, Ethan's coldness, his indifference to the kids, and, finally, the slap. Natalie was horrified. She grabbed my hands and said, "Charlotte, you don't have to live like this. You need to get out before it gets worse." She promised to help me, and that promise became the first glimmer of hope I'd felt in months. With Natalie's encouragement, I reached out to a local women's shelter. I was terrified. What if Ethan found out? What if he tried to stop me? But I knew I couldn't stay. Not for me, and certainly not for my daughters. I also contacted a lawyer, Rebecca Carter, who specialized in family law. She listened to my story with compassion and assured me we could build a case to protect me and the girls. I didn't feel strong at that moment, but Rebecca made me believe I could be. As I lay awake at night, holding Emma in one arm and listening to Lily's soft breathing, I made a vow to myself. No matter what it took, I would fight for my daughters. They deserved better. We deserved better. And I was going to make sure we got it, no matter how hard the road ahead might be. The days after that night felt like I was walking on broken glass. Every sound made me flinch. Every moment Ethan was in the house felt like a ticking bomb. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Lily and Emma, but deep inside, I knew it couldn't go on like this. My daughters deserved a mother who wasn't living in fear. Natalie became my lifeline. She visited often, pretending it was just a friendly drop-by so Ethan wouldn't suspect anything. Behind the scenes, though, she was helping me prepare. She introduced me to Rebecca Carter, the family lawyer who would become my anchor. I remember sitting in Rebecca's office, my hands trembling as I described everything. Ethan's coldness, his temper, and the slap. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She just listened, nodding, and when I finished, she said something that changed everything. "Charlotte, you don't have to do this alone. We'll make sure you and your girls are safe." That same day, I contacted a local women's shelter. The coordinator, a kind woman named Marcy, assured me they could provide temporary housing and support. She explained that the shelter was confidential and secure. Ethan wouldn't be able to find us there. It gave me hope, but it also terrified me. Leaving wasn't just about packing a bag and walking out. It was about uprooting everything I'd known and facing an uncertain future. But I knew it was the only way. I started documenting everything, just like Rebecca advised. Every cold comment, every outburst, every bruise, I captured it all. I even recorded some of our conversations when Ethan's temper flared. I knew it would be crucial if we went to court. It wasn't easy, though. Each time Ethan lashed out, I had to act like it didn't hurt, like I wasn't already halfway out the door. One night, Ethan came home unusually early. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and he walked in, looking tense. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "About what?" He hesitated, then said, "I think we should take a break. You, me, the girls, maybe we need some time apart. You could stay with your parents for a while." I could barely believe what I was hearing. He was trying to push me out, to make it seem like it was my choice. But I stayed calm. "I'm not leaving my daughters," I said firmly. His face darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out again. Instead, he just muttered something under his breath and stormed off. That was the moment I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, while he was at work, I packed a small bag for me and the girls. Natalie drove us to the shelter, and as we pulled away from the house, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. I was finally doing something, but I had no idea what would happen next. The shelter was different from what I expected. It wasn't some cold, institutional place. It was warm, welcoming. The other women there shared similar stories, and for the first time, I didn't feel so alone. Marcy helped me settle in, and I remember her saying, "You're safe now, Charlotte. Take it one day at a time." But safety didn't mean the fight was over. Rebecca and I worked tirelessly on the legal case. We gathered every piece of evidence I had and even reached out to my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, who had overheard Ethan yelling during one of his outbursts. She agreed to testify, saying she'd always worried about how Ethan treated me. Ethan, of course, didn't make things easy. He started showing up at the shelter uninvited, demanding to see me and the girls. Marcy and the staff always turned him away, but his persistence was unsettling. He even tried to call me, leaving voicemails filled with apologies and promises to change. One of them still haunts me. "You're ruining our family, Charlotte. Come home, and I'll forgive you." Forgive me? As if I was the one tearing our family apart. Rebecca reassured me that this behavior would only strengthen our case. "He's showing his true colors," she said. But it didn't make it any less terrifying. The court date finally arrived, and I was a wreck. Walking into that courtroom, seeing Ethan sitting there with his smug expression, it took everything in me not to turn around and run. But then I thought of Lily and Emma, their tiny hands holding mine, their innocent faces looking up at me. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them. Rebecca was incredible. She presented our case with precision, laying out every detail of Ethan's abuse and neglect. She showed the photos of my bruises, played the recordings, and called Mrs. Jenkins to testify. Ethan's lawyer tried to paint me as overly emotional, but Rebecca didn't let them get away with it. She was relentless, and I was so grateful for her strength. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of Lily and Emma and ordering Ethan to pay child support, I felt like I could breathe again. Ethan's face when the verdict was read, he looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. For the first time, I saw him vulnerable, and it was strangely empowering. The battle wasn't over, though. I still had to rebuild my life, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could. As I left the courtroom that day, holding my daughters close, I whispered to them, "We're free now. Mommy's got you." And I meant it. Leaving the courtroom that day felt like the first step into a new life. But stepping out didn't mean I was free from fear. Even with the ruling in my favor, Ethan's shadow loomed over me. He was still out there, still capable of manipulation and cruelty. I couldn't let my guard down, not yet. Back at the shelter, I started piecing things together. The staff there connected me with resources to find housing, and within a few weeks, I managed to secure a small 2-bedroom apartment in a quieter part of the city. It wasn't much, but it was ours. For the first time in years, I had a space that felt safe, a place where Lily and Emma could just be kids without the tension of Ethan's temper hanging over them. Adjusting to life as a single mother was harder than I expected. There were nights when both girls cried at once, and I felt like I was failing. Bills piled up, and I worried constantly about money. Ethan had been ordered to pay child support, but he wasn't consistent. Some months, the payments came late or not at all. Rebecca assured me we could take legal action if he didn't comply, but even the idea of more court battles exhausted me. Still, I kept going. I found a part-time marketing job that allowed me to work from home, which helped me be there for the girls. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I reminded myself why I'd left. I thought of Lily's laughter, Emma's tiny fingers clutching mine, and the quiet moments when I could finally breathe without fear. That kept me moving forward. Natalie stayed by my side through it all. She'd become more than a friend. She was my rock. She dropped by after her shifts at the hospital, bringing groceries or just sitting with me while I vented. One evening, she said something that stuck with me. "You're stronger than you realize, Charlotte. Look at what you've already survived." She was right. I'd survived. But surviving wasn't enough. I wanted to thrive for my daughters and for myself. It was during one of those long nights of reflection that I discovered something shocking. While sorting through old financial documents, I found records of accounts and assets Ethan had never mentioned. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Ethan had been hiding money, lots of it, throughout our marriage. He'd opened accounts under his name and funneled significant amounts of his earnings there, likely to keep me in the dark about his true financial situation. Anger boiled inside me. All those years when he'd made me feel small, when he'd refused to support me emotionally or financially, he'd been sitting on a hidden fortune. I wasn't just angry for myself, I was furious for Lily and Emma. That money could have provided stability for them, and Ethan had kept it hidden out of spite or selfishness. I called Rebecca immediately. She listened carefully, and then said, "We can use this. He's violated the terms of your settlement agreement by hiding assets. It's not just unethical, it's illegal." We started a new legal process to claim what Ethan had tried to hide. It wasn't easy. Ethan, predictably, fought back, accusing me of trying to bleed him dry. But the evidence was irrefutable. With Rebecca's expertise, we were able to uncover the full extent of his deception. When the ruling came down in my favor again, I felt a sense of justice I hadn't thought possible. That money changed everything. It wasn't about revenge. It was about giving my daughters a better future. I set up college funds for both of them and used a portion to pay off debts and create a stable home. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of financial insecurity crushing me. Amid all of this, a surprising friendship began to blossom. Daniel Reed, my neighbor in the apartment complex, had always been kind to me. He was a teacher, and he'd often see me struggling to carry groceries or chasing after the girls. One evening, he knocked on my door with a plate of cookies and said, "I thought you might need a little pick-me-up." It was such a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. Over time, Daniel became a steady presence in our lives. He wasn't pushy or demanding, just kind, patient, and genuinely caring. Lily and Emma adored him, and I found myself looking forward to his visits. For the first time since Ethan, I started to feel the faint stirrings of hope in my heart. But it wasn't just Daniel's kindness that helped me heal, it was the support of everyone around me. Natalie, Rebecca, the women at the shelter, they all reminded me that I wasn't alone. And as I began to rebuild my life, I realized that I wanted to help others who'd been through what I had. I started volunteering at the shelter, sharing my story with women who felt trapped or hopeless. I told them about the fear, the pain, but also about the strength I'd found. Every time I saw a woman's eyes light up with the realization that she could fight back, I felt a little more whole. By then, my life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, not just surviving. Little did I know, the most shocking twist was still to come. As I began to rebuild my life, I started to feel a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. My daughters were thriving. Lily was adjusting well to kindergarten, making friends and coming home with stories about her day, while Emma, now a toddler, was full of giggles and boundless energy. Every milestone they reached reminded me why I'd fought so hard to escape Ethan's shadow. But the journey wasn't over. One final twist was about to change everything. It started with a routine meeting with Rebecca to finalize some paperwork related to Ethan's hidden assets. As we wrapped up, she mentioned something almost in passing. "Charlotte, there's one last thing we might want to explore. Ethan's financial records suggest he may have ties to some suspicious dealings. It could be worth looking into." At first, I hesitated. I wanted to move on, not dig deeper into Ethan's toxic world. But the thought lingered. What if uncovering more about his secrets could protect me and my daughters in the long run? So, I gave Rebecca the green light to investigate further. What she uncovered left me stunned. Ethan had been involved in fraudulent real estate deals, falsifying documents to inflate property values and pocketing the excess. The accounts he'd hidden weren't just a way to shield money from me. They were part of his larger scheme to avoid detection. Rebecca explained that this wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. Ethan could face serious charges if we brought the information to the authorities. For a moment, I grappled with what to do. Part of me wanted to let it go, to focus on the life I was building with my daughters. But another part of me, the part that had endured years of his lies, cruelty, and manipulation, felt a deep sense of responsibility. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting to ensure Ethan couldn't hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt me. With Rebecca's help, I submitted the evidence to the authorities. The investigation that followed was intense, and it quickly became clear that Ethan's crimes went deeper than we'd initially thought. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. When I heard the news, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and, most importantly, closure. Ethan's arrest marked the end of his control over my life. For years, he'd tried to keep me trapped, physically, emotionally, and financially. But now, the tables had turned. He was facing the consequences of his actions, and I was finally free to move forward without fear. With Ethan out of the picture, life began to take on a new rhythm. Daniel became an even more important part of our lives. He never tried to rush me into anything, always respecting the pace I needed to heal. Over time, his quiet kindness melted the walls I'd built around my heart. One evening, as we watched Lily and Emma playing in the park, he turned to me and said, "Charlotte, I don't want to overstep, but I care about you, about all of you. If there's a future where I can be part of your life, I'd be honored." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, not just physically, but emotionally. Daniel wasn't trying to control or fix me. He just wanted to be there to support me and my girls as we built our new life. And we did. Together, we created a home filled with love and laughter. But I didn't stop there. My experiences had ignited a fire in me, a desire to help other women escape the cycle of abuse and reclaim their lives. I began speaking at events and sharing my story, hoping to inspire others to find the strength to break free. One of the proudest moments of my life came when I established a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting survivors of domestic violence. With Natalie and Rebecca's help, we created programs to provide shelter, legal aid, and emotional support for women in need. Every time I saw a woman walk through our doors and leave with hope in her eyes, I felt like I was honoring the journey I'd been on. Looking back, I still marvel at how far I've come. There were moments when I thought I'd never escape, when I believed Ethan's cruelty had stolen everything from me. But I've learned that resilience isn't just about surviving. It's about finding the strength to rebuild, to thrive, and to turn pain into purpose. Lily and Emma are growing up in a home filled with love, surrounded by people who care for them. They'll never have to know the fear I once felt, and that's the greatest victory of all. My journey wasn't easy, but it's proof that even in the face of betrayal and despair, justice and courage can prevail. And as I sit here today, watching my daughters play in the sunshine, I know one thing for certain. We are free, we are strong, and we are finally home.